How are we doing, everybody? Welcome into the SFS channel and another piece of lineup advice for Week 11 fantasy football. In this episode, I'll be talking through 5 wide receivers that I'm a bit hesitant to put in lineups for this week's matchups. These are players that I have some pessimistic views about their matchup, their usage, potential quarterback situations. We'll talk about all that and more in today's episode and the reasons why I'm a bit spooked and scared off of these players for this week's game. So, as always, we've got our start episodes up for both the running back and receivers positions as well for today, so make sure to check those out after you're done watching this one, and let's dive into today's video. All right, so what we do here at SFS every single week is I break down my picks, where I was right and where I was wrong from the previous week's matchups. However, unfortunately, this past week in week 10, I did not get around to posting the sit segment for running backs or receivers. Only the starts episodes were able to get out. So we don't have a recap for you this week. We will be diving right into our picks from this week's games, though. We did do our recap for the starts episode, though, if you want to check that out. So DJ Moore here is the first player I'll be sitting and I'm very pessimistic on for this week's matchup. Now, really, the main reason for my harsh critique of DJ in week 11 is not his fault. As always, it is not a DJ Moore problem. It's a Baker Mayfield problem. Unfortunately, PJ Walker, the man who has at times looked like the savior of DJ Moore's 2022 fantasy football stock, and that is really saying something because PJ Walker is still not high-level quarterbacking. The problem has been reintroduced. The parasite, if you will, has been reinserted into the offensive starting lineup. Baker Mayfield is going to be this team's lead quarterback, literally a few days removed from bashing his face off of offensive linemen and teammates' helmets while not wearing his own helmet. The guy literally looks like he has CTE already. Probably not something funny to joke about, but geez, Baker Mayfield, what are you doing? That's going to be me watching DJ Moore in my lineups where we're starting 3 and 4 flexes, and I have to play him no matter what. But for this week's game, if you can avoid starting DJ Moore, absolutely do so. This is a Baltimore secondary that's actually been fairly stingy against opposing fantasy receivers after being absolutely terrible against them last year. So things have swung in favor of the Ravens defense and against opposing fantasy receivers, in addition to the fact that you have the garbage quarterback play, and in addition to the fact that DJ Moore and this Carolina offense have definitely established a run-first identity and scaled down their passing attempts per week here. So this is an overall culmination of just risk that I don't want to be taking on for this week, and the upside, frankly, is not high enough to get me even slightly excited about what he could do in this game. So like I said, I actually do have to start DJ Moore in a lineup where we've got a really deep starting lineup, but that'll be, one of the more painful fantasy acts that I have to make here in week 11. Allen Robinson this week, no Cooper Kupp, bad news for his owners. He had ankle surgery today. He's headed to the IR, will miss at least 4 games. That stinks. A-Rob now projects to be the wide receiver 1 for this team, but on the road at New Orleans, I'm not having any of it. I'm still not optimistic about A-Rob. I've seen enough this season, and frankly, this offense, I think, is going to have a complete and utter meltdown. This is the battle of the absolute terrible teams here. The Saints, unfortunately, have kind of crumbled and eroded offensively, as has their defense, but if you're telling me that there's a potential that John Wolford starts again this week, even if Stafford comes back missing his top weapon, what is he going to do? Cooper Kupp has been the trademark of availability and consistency for this team, and we have not seen Matthew Stafford without him on the field. So either way, this is going to be an uncomfortable environment for both pass catchers, the run game, quarterbacks, everyone here in Los Angeles, the garbage trash offensive line. It's all going to be a problem. So even if the volume ramps up here, after all, Cooper Kupp had 11.2 targets per game this year, I still don't know, based on the tape, if Allen Robinson can make the most of it. I'm being genuinely serious here. He cannot separate vertically at a consistent enough level. The Saints secondary has had struggles. They've been kind of inconsistent. They've had really good games. They've had really bad games. It's just a spot I don't want to be in. I don't think the upside is high enough to give him the nod here. I don't think he's a top 30 play this week. There are players that I think have just as much risk but higher reward in terms of their ceiling value being a bit higher. I'm staying away. I'm backing off here, and I'm going to look other directions. In week 11, George Pickens taking on Cincinnati here. Another situation where I feel like So if we go back to, what was it, week 9, pre-bye week for the Cincinnati Bengals, I liked the opposing matchup because Chidobe Awuzie had just torn his ACL and was missing for the following contest. So they're down their top cornerback. This is against Carolina. Now that I remember it, against DJ Moore, and I loved him in that matchup. And the Bengals defense came out here against another opposing bad offense and just completely brick-walled them, and it was a meltdown for Carolina from quarter 1 to quarter 4. The Pittsburgh Steelers are coming off of a promising offensive performance, just like the Panthers were heading into that week 9 performance, I want to say it was. And they've got a spot where they just had a nice double-digit win against New Orleans Saints. And I think that we might be riding a little bit high on this team. Again, Chidobe Awuzie is out of the lineup here still for this team, their top cornerback. So George Pickens is going to be seeing number 3 coverage if Deontay Johnson draws the top corner. We'll see what happens, or they probably won't shadow to begin with. But at the end of the day, this is the same trap spot, I feel, for a low target volume player in a poor offense led by a rookie quarterback. George Pickens has 7 total targets in his last 2 games. He's got 4 targets and 3 targets respectively, and he is not someone I necessarily trust in terms of his floor value. He is insanely talented. He has a massive frame. He is a physically dominating player that will impose his will against others. However, he had a rushing touchdown last week. It was very weird to see. They basically said, no thanks, Najee Harris. Thanks for getting us to the 1-yard line. Here you go, George Pickens. And we're not betting on touchdown productivity here. I think this is a situation where Cincinnati's defense is a bit better than we give it credit for, and the Steelers' offense might be getting a little bit slightly. I know that not many of us are being hyperbolic with our expectations for them this week, but I do think there might be an overvaluing of them in terms of what their pass catchers bring to the table. I'm also still quite low on Deontay Johnson, although he does crack my top 30 for this week. Brandin Cooks against Washington here. Brandin Cooks has been skyrocketing down, I guess so plummeting, the reverse of skyrocketing. He's been plummeting down my rankings here as of late, and this week was another telling sign. I think he's just out there collecting a paycheck right now. I think he's essentially unstartable at this point in the season, and although he did have 7 targets in this last week's game, after the trade drama and debacle that he had with this organization, I don't trust him whatsoever on a weekly basis. So Nico Collins misses 2 games, comes back, has a 10-target performance, scores a really nice touchdown, and I think he might chart in as the wide receiver 1 in fantasy football moving forward here. Brandin Cooks, as a disgruntled, upset veteran player, just doesn't seem interested in this team. He doesn't seem super bought in. This is a decent matchup against the Washington Commanders, and it's an above-average one in terms of allowing opposing fantasy receivers to exceed their average fantasy points scored per game this season, but I just don't like this one. Again, his role has shrunk in this offense. He no longer seems to be the clear-cut number 1 option, and his best 2 games of the season were in week 1 and week 2, where he had double-digit targets in each contest. He has not done that since, and he has had 4 or fewer receptions every single game dating back to week 5, only played 64% of the snaps here in week 10. So red flag, red flag, red flag. It's turning into doing the laundry here with Brandin Cooks. If you look at it from that perspective, for his fantasy football outlook, I am all out on him and looking a different direction. And then Drake London here, we are sitting him yet again this week. I feel like I put him in the episode literally every game, but he came out and had a double-digit scoring game this past week, so I did want to talk about him again. I'm not expecting a breakout. I am not growing my level of optimism for him. As a matter of fact, my analysis hasn't changed whatsoever. Marcus Mariota has had 2 games all season long with 30 passing attempts or more. That is not cutting it. Justin Fields, another guy who has not had 1 this season, bottom of the league in terms of passing attempts per game and overall passing volume. So staying away, it's really hard to consistently produce fantasy success, even in a good matchup like this one against the Chicago Bears. You're telling me you got to go out there on 5-6 targets and get the job done? You're asking too much here. So he had his best game back in week 2 with 12 targets. He's had 7 targets per game or less every week since. Like I said, Atlanta's had 30 passing attempts just twice this season. That's not getting it done either. He's incredibly touchdown dependent. I'm not flexing him, even though he has the size and frame to make those plays happen at will. And again, I'd be shocked to see him go over double digits consistently to end out this year. So to recap, I'm sitting George Pickens against Cincinnati this week. week. DJ Moore at Baltimore, Brandin Cooks at home against Washington, Allen Robinson on the road at New Orleans, and Drake London against Chicago. None of these players are guys that I'm interested in even having in flex positions for the most part. For DJ Moore, the talent is there. You can make a case if you're in a 12-man plus league for a flex spot or a multi-flex league. You could put him in there as well, but really looking for the most part to avoid all of these players. I just don't like the outlooks, and it's a bit suspect to me. So thank you guys so much for watching. As always, we do have those other episodes for start sit content out for today. Check them out. I'll see you there. Peace out.